News, government support, local authority support, the supporters. Last year we had 16,000 season ticket sales, which was our highest ever. So it's a mix of different revenue streams, which go back then towards the development of the game at all levels, be that at grassroots level, be it at women's football, be it at international level, be it at the Electricity League level.
Is that figure for grassroots and women's level an increase over the past number of financial years?
Yeah, every year I think we've increasing our support for grassroots level, be that either financially or resource support. And obviously around women's football it's really important that we increase our spending. There was good news yesterday where the government announced further money next year for women's sport, and that's something that we would be very keen to get more funding for, as well as the money that we'll put into getting more girls active in the game.
And you mentioned that you plan to tell the association at the AGM that you'll be debt free by 2020. You've already mentioned that. Obviously there's plenty of upcoming projects, like obviously hosting the European Championships in Dublin. Is that all part of that aim to be debt free by 2020? Or?
I think the events that are coming to Dublin through UEFA are different from dealing with the reduction of our debt. There's some really significant events coming to Ireland over the next couple of years through UEFA, one being the draw for the Euro 2020 taking place in the Convention Centre on the 2nd of December. 140 million people will watch that live. Next year we have the under 17 Euros coming to Dublin and Longford and Waterford. That's over 9,000 bed spaces, 16 teams. It's going to be a tournament that we're really looking forward to hosting. And then of course the year after we have the Euros coming to Dublin, 4 games, 3 group games, 1 round of 16. The aim for the association and the national team and the management is to qualify for that tournament, because if we do, 2 of our home games will be in Dublin, and that's something we'll all look forward to.
For years now, the FAI has been supported with an investment for continued employment for the likes of Giovanni Trapattoni recently, obviously Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane now. That sort of investment is now gone. How confident are you that, like, obviously Martin O'Neill won't be the manager forever, so how confident are you that the FAI will be able to I suppose financially support quality managers for years ahead when Martin does leave?
Well, I think the first point is that Dennis O'Brien was very supportive to the association. He gave us 12.5 million euros towards international appointments over a period of time, and without that we wouldn't have been able to make the appointments that we did. But it's now time that, as we announced a good number of months ago, that we stand on our own 2 feet, which we're absolutely capable of doing. And we knew when we renewed Martin O'Neill's contract, along with Roy Keane, the management team, that we would not have a benefactor in place for that particular appointment. And we are able to stand on our own 2 feet, and that's the case. So Martin is contracted obviously through to the 2020 Euros, and the big aim now of the organisation and Martin and the players, management team, is to qualify.
Plenty to talk about over the last week, but if I can mention first St Patrick's Athletic and their plans for a new stadium out by St Michael's being turned down by the City Council. Is that something that you're particularly disappointed with?
I think there's lots of good news around infrastructure developments in the league. One being today, Drogheda United announcing their new stadium with us and Louth County Council. Louth County Council have been a great partner on this particular project. It'll be a 3,000 seater stadium initially, up to a 10,000 seater stadium. So working with Louth County Council and Drogheda United Football Club and the FAI, we're able to deliver such a tremendous project. The same will apply to DCC with Dalymount Park for both Shelburne and Bohemians Football Club, and Glanmire in Cork in terms of the Munster Centre of Excellence, which is a cooperation between Cork County Council, the government and ourselves. In terms of St Patrick's Athletic, I think it's well known that they obviously made a submission to DCC which wasn't acceptable to DCC. DCC have their own reasons as to why that was not. But if St Patrick's Athletic or any club want the support of the association to deliver projects like I've outlined with Drogheda with Louth County Council, with Shelburne and Bohemians, with DCC in Dublin, who are a great partner of ours, or with Cork County Council and Glanmire, we're obviously open to help any club to develop their facilities. And
but given the plans that they had and given the plans that you have as well for other stadia, is it slightly disappointing that they're not going to get that on their what would have been a planned schedule for them?
I think you have to have all the stakeholders involved on any project that you want to develop facilities. And Cork County Council is one example. I remember going to Cork maybe 3 or 4 Mondays in a row, meeting Cork County Council, identifying the site in Glanmire, getting a long lease on it, and then taking it from there in terms of the development. And that's just an example of having all the stakeholders involved. And any advice I'd give to any club, or any club at local level, be it at junior, amateur level or senior level, is you need to have all the stakeholders on board to deliver the project.
And you mentioned Delaney Park as well. Obviously that's been in the pipeline for quite some time as well. I think the last I'd heard of it, there was some funding issues holding up that particular project. Is there anything? Is there a latest sort of development on that or timescale?
There's a feasibility study being conducted by DCC at the moment, but I would expect by the end of September that the plans would be outlined. And there's also a national projects fund specifically for national projects for sport announced by the government, and the opening of that fund, I believe, will be in the next number of weeks. So, first of all, the feasibility study that's been done in terms of DCC, which will deliver a new stadium, or a revised stadium, if you like, a refurbished stadium for both Bohemians and Shelbourne in Delaney Park. That will be, I gather, announced the end of September. And there's also a fund announced by the government, which will be open to applications, and Delaney Park is certainly a project that we would want to see supported there.
And sticking with matters sort of, I suppose, within the Airtricity League, and I'll obviously be speaking to Fran Gavin more in depth shortly, but in terms of what's been happening with Bray Wanderers in Limerick, and statements going backwards and forwards between the FAI and the PFAI and so on, what would have been, I suppose, described at first as a positive outcome last night with the association's fund to help struggling clubs along the way, was sort of met with a bewilderment from the PFAI that was the first they had sort of heard of it. Why would a plan be announced before discussions?
I think the most important thing for me and the FAI is that all the players are paid. So we had issues around 2 particular clubs last week, and they are now up to date. All the players are paid. And Breen outlined earlier that the industry is about 5.6, 5.7 million a year in players' wages. We want that obviously to increase, and we want all the clubs to have the ability to pay their players. Fran will deal with you in the detail of the last number of days and whatever statements have been issued. The most important thing for the FAI's point of view is that players would be up to date in the contracts that are obviously given to them by the particular clubs. And in any weeks in the league, there's ups and downs, there's positives, there's negatives. Today's a good day because of the Drogheda United project, and there's a significant positive announcement coming tomorrow as well about one of the other League of Ireland clubs.
But is it sort of, with all the headlines that have been written about this, it's sort of put Irish football in a pretty dark place, that year after year, and as you mentioned, Fran will talk to me about this in a minute, but year after year there's some, whether it's one club or 2 clubs or many clubs will come with issues, and this is something that an awful lot of people would assume would be covered within the club licensing. Is club licensing something that sort of for you'd envisage sort of reviewing and sort of potentially changing in years to come? Or?
Club licensing is a bit like VAR. It's been good for football. Many years ago, when the FAI took over running the league, the collective losses of the clubs were something like €7 million. That's not the fact today. Eamon will outline to you did outline earlier, Eamon Breen, our finance director, that the industry was generated about €50 million over the last 3 years between the 20 clubs, and every player is paid up to date today. Now, are there issues along the way? Of course there is, like any business, like any industry, like any other football association across Europe. Ultimately, all players are paid today. Ultimately, all players have been paid over the previous 3 years, and both clubs have made their commitments, as have the other 18. And like I said to you a little bit earlier, Drogheda United is a really fantastic story today. They were looking for a stadium for many, many years. Now we've negotiated with Louth County Council a new stadium for Drogheda United, which is a big positive. Delaney Park, when the plans are announced for Delaney Park, hopefully the end of September, and the funding is in place, it's a great story for the League of Ireland, as is Glanmire, as is Finn Harps Football Club. So there's ups and downs in every aspect of football, but overall, as I said to you today, Drogheda United, fantastic announcement.
Okay, that'll do me. John,
all right,
thank you very much indeed.